Will you please state your name and where you reside?
Yes, my name is Joe O'Connor, and I live at 64 Harbor View Road in West Chatham.
We are okay. So we're gonna talk about some of your early life. Did you lived in Buffalo, New York, right?
I was born in Buffalo at the Millard Fillmore Hospital, and when I was about 5, we moved to Syracuse. My dad was in the insurance business, and he was transferred to Syracuse.
So will you tell us a little bit about your early life?
Sure, I went to school at Edward Smith and junior high at Aaron Levy Junior High, and then Christian Brothers Academy High School. And it was probably a pretty normal kid's life, and I started playing the trumpet and played for about 15 years, and that was kind of what I liked.
Did you ever plan on joining the Navy?
Well, I didn't at that stage in my life. When I went to Boston College, the draft was active. So I was drafted by the Marines and the Army. And so the Vietnam War was beginning to get active then. While it had started in 1950 with the French, we were getting active in it as advisors in the early 60s. So I pretty much knew my whole college life that I was going to go in one of the services.
So what was your reaction to being drafted?
I was proud to think about serving the country, although I did not want to go in the Marine Corps or the Army. So I went down to Summer Street and I took the test in my senior year at Boston College, and I did very poorly on it. And I was interviewed by a captain, a 4-stripe captain, and a 3-stripe commander, and a lieutenant commander. And I said, "What does this test really tell you? Do good naval officers all do well in it?" And they looked at each other and they were smiling. And I said, "Just send me west on a destroyer out of Long Beach, California, and I'll show you what a good naval officer is." And they all shook my hand. It took about 45 seconds.
What were your parents' reactions to you being drafted?
My dad had merchant licenses, and he was very high about the Navy. He had licenses to carry people commercially, and he was very much all about the sea. In fact, we used to sail through the Great Lakes and down to Cape Cod here. And when I was 4 or 5 and my sister was 6.
Was being sent out to sea hard, like leaving your family to go alone?
Well, my parents dropped me off, and I waved goodbye to them, and I shook hands with my father. And sure, I was going to miss him, and but it wasn't too long after that when I got my first haircut and said a little off the sides, and I was minus all the hair that I had.
Did you have any relatives that had served before you?
My dad couldn't serve in World War II because he had a condition, so he worked in a gun factory in Buffalo during World War II. I didn't have any direct relatives at all that served in the military.
So, when did you end up going out to sea?
Well, I went to OCS from August of '66 to December of '66. And then I went to San Francisco for damage control and engineering training for 3 months. And then I took an airplane from San Francisco to the Philippines and caught an oiler to the Gulf of Tonkin, where I was highlined over to my ship. And they always take pleasure when you're new in dunking you on the way across. So I arrived wet at my new ship.
What was your daily life like on the Navy?
We worked 6 hours on and 6 hours off. We stood 6-hour watches. I stood bridge watches. The things that we did were we did some celestial navigation. We'd plot contacts using the theory of relative motion. We'd handle the ship. We all pretty quickly learned to dock the ship and take it off the pier. It was pretty exciting because it was 400 foot long and 3,600 tons, so it was quite a piece of metal to move around.
Throughout your journey through the Navy, did you ever feel scared?
Sure. I'd be telling you a fib if I didn't. But yes, we were in a war zone. We picked up pilots coming back from Rolling Thunder, mostly Phantom jets, F-4Bs and Cs, and the pilots would fly back from Hanoi, and they would fly over one of the 52 SAM sites, and they were often damaged and jumped out of the planes, and we or the helicopters would pick them up, and so there was a lot going on. It was pretty active. We were down in I Corps for a while following the Hancock, and then we went up a little further north to Nha Trang to do harassment and interdiction fire. We would shoot at the enemy in front of the troops that were in there, the Marines and the Army, and so it looked pretty much like like the 4th of July all the time.
What kept you going through the war?
Well, we felt we were doing the right thing for the country, and that was motivation enough. We felt we had a mission, and we did it.
What was your best memory throughout or during the war?
I enjoyed the travel as well as the war. We landed in ports Sasebo and Yokosuka, Japan, Olongapo City in the Philippines, Kaohsiung, Taiwan. We actually spent, of the 3 years I was on the ship, we actually spent 1.5 years in the war zone in the Gulf of Tonkin, and the rest of it we did sail other places that were quite nice.
So now sharing your best memory, what was your darkest memory during the war?
Well, there are things that happen on ships. My darkest memory, to be very honest with you, is we lost one of our sailors. We were way up north in east of Hanoi, and he was not well suited to be in the Navy, or the military, I guess you might say, and he jumped in the water and swam ashore in a free fire zone. And I guess it was safe to say he had a mental breakdown, but the spotter plane came by and said, "Hey, you got a guy in the water," and I happened to be up on the bridge at the time, and I said to the captain, "Do you want to send out the motor whaleboat for him, and he said, "We're not going to. We're risking too many people." So that was a dark memory. I can say that.
What was your most memorable moment?
I think the most memorable moment was, I don't know, there were a lot of them. I think the most memorable moment at sea on the ship was the first time that you land the ship. And believe me, it takes about 4 cans of deodorant to get through it. And fortunately, the first one was uneventful, and some of the last ones were not, or were eventful, I guess you'd say, because when you are going too fast, you start taking pieces of the pier off. So that was a lot of fun. It was kind of a test.
What did you and your closest friends do to pass the time during your serving?
We were busy. We didn't have any free time. My divisions were the ship fitters and the auxiliary machinist mates and the electricians. And I stood engineering officer of the watch when I wasn't up on the bridge, and had 3 divisions, about 30 people, and there wasn't much free time. We used to tow targets and fire rifles at them for fun sometimes, but didn't have a lot of spare time. We also used to get, during underway replenishments, used to get movies from the carriers and the oilers, and we'd sit there at night and watch a movie in the eating place.
Who was your idol during your serving? Who did you look up to the most?
Well, we had a very enterprising captain. He was very charismatic, and he was quite a wonderful ship handler. He ended up making admiral and going on to be the executive officer of the New Jersey when the battleship was commissioned. And that itself was also a very impressive sight.
If you could go back to your service and change something, would you?
No. I went, I took everything out of it that I could, gave it everything that I could, and it was just fine. In fact, I enjoyed it. I almost stayed in.
When retrieving the pilots, would you did they have bad reactions ever?
Well, we were on plane guard. Oh, that's my clock. It's a Mustang clock.
It's all right.
Sometimes the end was not good. The first day I was there, an A4 Skyhawk slid off the deck of the Hancock, and the pilot popped out of the canopy, and his parachute opened, and but his belt didn't release, and he went down with the seat. And so we didn't always have an opportunity to pick them up. The helicopters were also picking them up, so they usually got there first, and we would stand by, and we would also pick up the wreckage and document it too, as well.
Did you ever meet a Vietnamese soldier?
Sure. We used to go to gunfire support conferences in Da Nang, and there were, we saw quite a few.
What was going on through your head while overseas?
Not sure what you mean.
Well, what were you thinking? Did you ever think that you weren't going to make it back?
No, no, I didn't. I I went on two cruises on the ship, and we, I mean, we went through all kinds of wild weather, um, but I always believed that I would make it back.
What was the most exciting memory of the war? Like, what really, like, got you, like, your heart pumping?
It all got my heart pumping. Um, there was high-speed ships coming out of Haiphong Harbor, and um, there was all action in the skies and accidents on the carriers, and I mean it was pretty exciting all the time.
If you had to define a hero, what would you define them as?
Define hero?
Define hero.
I'd say anybody that was there was a hero.
So, saying that, would you describe yourself as a hero?
Well, I guess I was there, but I didn't. We were not under fire. I have been shot at a few times, but we were not under fire like the people on land. The highest casualty rates were the soldiers on the ground and the Marines on the ground.
What were the times being shot at like?
Well, they weren't even close, to tell you the truth. We were going into Da Nang Harbor and there's bullets splashing in the water, but it's, they probably weren't even shooting at us. They were probably shooting at each other on the, on the land.
So, you mentioned your biggest struggle. Like, what was the easiest thing you did? Meaning, like, not like obviously waking up and brushing your teeth, but like when you were really in the heat of the battle, what was like the best thing you thought you did?
Well, my job during the general quarters, if we were all in general quarters, we all had battle stations that we would go to. Mine was in Damage Control Central, and my job was to, if we were hit, to name the valves and that needed to isolate the systems so that we could minimize the damage and repair it.
What lessons did the Navy teach you?
Well, it told me discipline. I think the military is wonderful for learning discipline, how to follow orders, thinking on your feet.
Did you admire the people who fought, or the veterans who fought on land?
Oh, sure I did. I admire anybody that was there. Some of them, I work with a fellow at the Veterans Clinic that suffered a lot of damage as a soldier on the ground.
What would you say to a grandchild of yours if they were considering enlisting?
If there was
If you had a grandchild and they were considering enlisting, what would you say to them?
I would encourage them 100%.
Would you want them to go into the Navy like you did?
I think it's an excellent spot. The training is very, very good. I learned enough about the engineering plants and the systems on ships that I was hired right away when I got out of the Navy by General Dynamics to write engineers' operating guides. It was a skill I didn't have before those first 3 years, but it was a skill that got me a job after I left.
When you were at the ceremony and receiving your medals for serving, like, did you feel very proud of yourself?
Well, there wasn't much of a ceremony. We just put them on. When I was at sea, I don't have a lot of medals. We had the American Defense Medal. We got a medal for when you go inside the war zone, the Republic of Vietnam medal it's called. And there's a green and white one that you get after you have spent 12 or more months in the war zone. And those are the ones that I have.
What locations abroad did you serve in?
Well, there was the Vietnam locations. Is that what you mean?
Like, throughout your whole trip on the Navy boats, where did you go?
Well, I was out of Long Beach, California. I made 2 trips, 2 cruises, and we would stop at Guam on the way over and enjoy a little bit of liberty, and we would get 140,000 gallons of bunker oil and 40,000 gallons of water in Pearl Harbor on the way across. And we stopped in Sasebo and Yokosuka, Japan, and Olongapo City in the Philippines. There was a Navy base there at that time. And we stopped at Kaohsiung, Taiwan. We stopped at Mactan Island in the Philippines. That was about it for the active duty stops.
When you stopped at those locations, what did people think of the war? Like, were they very frightened?
They were pretty non-committal about the war. They didn't think one way or another, I don't think.
Are you in contact with any of your wartime friends?
I stayed in contact with them for a while, but it's been a number of years. Although there is a website, and a lot of people still go on it that I knew for the ship's website. The USS Henderson has a website of its own, and some people keep pretty active with it.
What problems did you have after the war?
None, I don't think. I was studying for the third engineer's test of the merchants. I was going to continue on a merchant ship, which I didn't get an opportunity for, but I was hired by General Dynamics to write engineers' operating guides or edit them.
Why weren't you able to get an opportunity for the merchant ships?
Well, I did it the wrong way. I studied for the test and tried to get in the union, and the way to do it really is to send your resume to the shipping companies and get hired through them. I did get an offer about 12 years later, but to go on a Texaco tanker, but I was already selling concrete and steel fasteners on construction sites, and things were going pretty well, so I never got back at it.
How did your family feel when you came home?
They were proud of me. They were happy to see me home.
So would you say your long time away from home affected them at all?
Well, I'll show you some pictures that they were very supportive.
You can do that after the interview if you would like.
Oh, okay. No, my dad, there's a picture there of my dad coming to visit my ship. He came to California and had dinner on the ship with me and saw a little bit about it, and he enjoyed it, and my mother came.
So where did you end up going after the war?
Well, I finished up in Hong Kong, actually. and I had an option um, to get off there or ride the ship back to the States, and decided kind of at the last minute to ride it back to the States.
When you were home, what did you go to right after? Like, where did you end up going to work?
General Dynamics. Um, we wrote and edited the engineers operating guides for the Oilers AOR 38, 39, 37, 38, 39, and we started the books for the light steamship lines for the liquid natural gas tankers.
If you were not drafted into the war, do you think you would have enlisted?
Probably not.
Was it like, are you glad that, like, how would you describe how you feel after doing the war or serving in the war?
I feel good. I feel that we did the job that we were there to do.
You mentioned that you aren't really in contact with many of your friends from war anymore. What can you describe to us? What was your best friend like in the war?
Well, he was the gunnery officer, and I stopped on the way back. He lived in Haywood, Oklahoma, and I stopped on the way back across country. I made a kind of a longish trip across country, and I stayed with him a couple weeks in Oklahoma and saw some things, the Grand Canyon and Dinosaur City and the Grand Ole Opry and that stuff.
Do you think the bond, or can you describe the bond that you made with all your friends?
We were all very close. The people in my division, we knew each other very well. But on the ship that I was on, it was 400 foot long and there were 245 people on it. And a third of the ship was engineering spaces, machinery. So we knew each other very well. It was close.
Did any family members feel differently about you after serving in the military?
No. They were all just as wonderful as they were before I left.
Where did you end up living after? Did you come straight to Cape Cod after serving?
No, I went to live in Quincy because that's where the shipyard was, and when we wrote the books for the engineering plants, we would go out on the sea trials to make sure that everything matched up with the books.
How did you end up on Cape Cod?
Well, my grandfather and mother and dad bought this lot in 1957, and or 56, I guess, and they built the house. A builder named George Eastman built it, and my grandfather retired here, and then eventually my mom and dad did, and now I'm here, and my sister is here in not here, but lives in outside of Hyannis, and so I've been here about 20 years.
Did you ever have nightmares about your time in Vietnam?
Yeah.
Can you describe those?
Yeah. We did a couple things that happened. Once a C-suction valve in a small compartment broke, and the compartment was filling up. I was trying to seal the C-section, and it had some kind of shells in it, or it wouldn't seal, And so, and the top of the compartment was here, and I did have a couple nightmares about that.
Any other nightmares that you had or bad experiences?
Well, there was a fire in the bilge. There were some, at sea, things break, and we had a fire in the bilge, and that was a little scary and kind of hot, and I think those are the two biggest ones.
So, wrapping up the interview, is there anything you'd like to say or any advice you'd like to give to somebody that would, or just any advice in general?
No, I really liked going to sea. I almost stayed in, and I didn't, but only because at that time I thought I was going in the merchants. But I would recommend the military to anybody. It gives you a good way to think, so you can think and get from point A to point B. It will put you in top physical and mental condition. The things that I learned, the courses were, I thought, much harder than college. In Newport, celestial navigation, there was the theory of relative motion, the steam cycle. A lot of those things are, for my kind of mind, more complicated than marketing or business courses.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm flattered that you fellows would come down and spend some time with me, and I hope it's a good interview for you, and I hope you get a good grade.
Thank you.
All right.